Before we begin, in the spirit of reconciliation, we acknowledge that we live, work, and play on the traditional territories of the Blackfoot Confederacy, the Siksika, Kainai, and Piikani, the Tsuut'ina, the Stoney Nakoda Nations, the Métis Nation, Region 3, and all people who make their home in the Treaty 7 region of southern Alberta. This acknowledgement was brought to you by CalgaryFoundation.org. Now, back to the podcast.
All right, so I'll go back on mute then.
Well, now I've started the recording, and I caught Gabe in that little bit, and that's going to stay.
Well, we need to do this.
Hello, everybody.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi. Hey there.
Bonjour. My name is Dean, and welcome back to the InkGuild podcast. Just go to fucking therapy.
If I develop Sims, delete the channel.
We need to start a revolution.
And you know what? I'm gonna say it.
All of them are fucking idiots.
25 is technically you.
Just say your morning routine.
And that's fucking it. Excuse me? Where my Grishas at? Yo.
I'd like you to rephrase that, Sam.
Is my guilty boner. Like, he'll attract the kind of people that are into serial killers. That's still bigger than a city.
It's more than one planet.
Percy Jackson is Greek mythology fanfiction.
Boneless. Oh my god.
I 100. No.
Hello, and welcome to the InkGuild, where a bunch of nerdy-ass creative writers are going to talk about D&D tonight. I will be your dungeon master, Marie-Soleil. We also have Alex joining us.
Hello.
And Tyler, the human variant.
I don't know if that's my actual species, but I'd bank on it. I love taking feats.
All right. So our lovely friend Dean cannot be joining us today. He is off fighting Tiamat. And we are going to be talking about D&D, as I already said.
Quality intro.
Sorry. Little nervous. My first time hosting. Okay. Thank you. Like this. Okay. I guess I was holding the mic too far away from my face.
It's not that you were holding it far away, it's that you were waving it around like a wand while you were speaking.
I'm ADHD. I talk with my hands. Anyway.
I thought that was just Italian.
And French. And ADHD. Neurodivergent, maybe? I don't know. But we're talking about D&D, and for those of you who are listening in and don't really know about that, that's Dungeons and Dragons. Now, Dungeons and Dragons is a collaborative storytelling game, role-playing storytelling game, where a group of people will sit together, roll dice, and have adventures.
It's very fun.
I don't know about that. I don't know if it's fun.
It's very fun if you do it right.
Like we started with the Star Wars episode, I want to preface all of this by saying I hate D&D.
Lies.
I'm sure that's true.
Sometimes.
All right, so I think we'll talk about first our history in Dungeons and Dragons, and I guess I'll go first as the host. I started playing D&D 3 or 4 years ago. A friend of mine that I met through a university club invited me to join their D&D party that they were DMing. And I joined up with a basic human rogue named Tiffany and have been playing since then. I've been in a couple different campaigns, always a player, never a dungeon master.
This is your first time dungeon mastering?
Yeah, I guess you could say that.
No wonder we haven't gotten any XP yet. Don't you know how this works? I should be level 4 by now, just saying.
Oh, sit down.
I am sitting.
Alex, what's your D&D history?
So it was something I'm also pretty new to actually playing, but it was something I was like vaguely interested in growing up. I didn't know too much about it. I had some friends that played when I was in high school, but I was never invited to those games. And then a couple years ago, I started watching Critical Role actually, and kind of like, I guess you could say, started like trying to figure out what the game was from there. And then I had a couple other friends that had never really played before and also wanted to play. So I was like, and I also was in a creative writing class with a bunch of friends. And I was showing off some of my maps for one of my worlds, and one of them was kind of like, "Oh, have you ever played D&D before? I think you'd be a good dungeon master." So all that kind of like happened around the same time. So to my few friends that were interested, I was like, I mean, what if we just tried it? So I set up a one shot, and we did it. It was fun. So we decided to try out a longer form campaign. Around that time, I was also invited to join another one. And yeah, and then one of my friends from the campaign I was DMing also decided to start running a campaign. So now I have like 3 ongoing ones that I'm part of, and then one that I DM as well. Yeah, so that's kind of how I got into it.
Nice. That sounds like a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Tyler, what's your history?
All right, youngins. So, I wouldn't say I've been playing D&D for over a decade, but I've been playing role-playing and tabletop games similar or exactly like it for over a decade. I think I started when I was like 12. Started off not with D&D, but with a couple guys from high school in the nerd group that wanted to do a really freeform roleplay. And we did like big political roleplay. So each of us was like a council member in the country's main advisory council. There was very little combat or anything. It was all just like hardcore debates and hidden character motivations. I would say Game of Thrones-esque, but we were honestly a lot more cutthroat. Yeah, that was a great time. I stabbed everyone in the back. That was my first experience. I'm going to leave this silence in the recording to know that I'm displeased. After that, I tried a whole bunch of things. I have tried multiple editions of D&D, including even reading the original handbook in DMG from edition 1. It's terrible. Never do it. I've played a bit of Pathfinder. I've played Warhammer, the various Warhammer games that are RPGs. I've made my own. I've made several role-playing games. Some of them more D&D-esque, including a big-ass, like, 50-page rulebook I developed at one point in time. Then I developed a game that's using a deck of cards to, like, navigate social structures in Balls as a weird role-playing game I had a feeling for. Eventually, one of my friends was like, "Why haven't you played D&D? You've played so many other things." And I was like, I don't know. Looks too popular, and I'm an annoying hipster. So, sure. And Lee, who we've had on before, finally convinced me to play 5th edition after a long while. And I haven't really looked back. I've tried other things here and there since, but I did the typical thing when you start in 5th edition because of almost how easy it is I went a little too hard, had like 6 campaigns going at one time, mostly DMing. I don't play much. And eventually burned out a bit, petered out, and relaxed. Instead of having so much going on at once, I'm now down to just like one little minor plan here and there. That way I don't get my notes mixed up and start bringing in characters from other campaigns that shouldn't exist in the campaign world I'm currently playing in. My players haven't noticed yet, and that's fine. They never will. I'll never tell them. Yeah, so that's where I'm at now, currently developing a campaign setting for future use.
All right. Currently, it's been an interesting time with D&D and other role-playing games because of COVID pandemic, and a lot of new resources have been popping up online. D&D Beyond has created virtual dice that they're selling and offering for free for some basic versions of it. Roll20 has popped up a lot bigger. What do you guys think about online D&D versus in-person D&D? My personal views is nothing beats an in-person game, but online can be fun. It just depends on the people involved, in my personal opinion. What do you think, Alex?
I would agree with you. I didn't get a lot of opportunities to play in-person games because I hadn't been playing for very long before everything happened. But like, there's a certain atmosphere to like being in person that you can't really capture online. But I do think it's good that we have the option to go online if we need to, in case there's a pandemic, or even if it's just like, one of the friends that I play with lives in a different time zone. So he tends to have to call in even when we do in-person games. So it's good that there's technology for that kind of stuff, because it makes playing with people that are further away easier as well.
That is a good point. I do have a friend who was going to be running a campaign that I was going to join, but we weren't able to do it. But he is running a campaign with, I think he's the only person in that group that's actually in Canada. We work together at a summer camp with a lot of international staff, and so a lot of the friends he made at that camp aren't from around here, and they play D&D online. That's a good point. I forgot about that. Tyler, what are your thoughts of online versus impersonal D&D?
I am glad that it exists. I am glad that we have resources for anyone who wants to play the game to play. But dear God, I cannot play online. I shouldn't say play. I cannot DM online. I already put so much work into planning encounters, creating plots, NPCs, maps, and all the jazz, that to then put another system over top of it and work within the bounds of a rule structure. Hello, Devin. How are you? I'm going to throw something at him if he yells again. It is what caused some of my burnout recently, is trying to make things work online. Because I'm very much an in-person. I really get into character. I act, I stand up, I adapt mannerisms. I need to see the board more clearly. I need to work with my players. I need to see how they're reacting. And even video chat just doesn't work for me. And not to mention that we also have to rely on technology and the issues that come with that. And I found we were waiting for like an hour before we were even able to start playing at our usual time, just because of how many issues we started to have with everyone logging in, keeping internet connection, and I had to stop. And that's what I took a break recently for.
Yeah, that makes sense. I know my original campaign that it's still technically going. We haven't ended it yet. We've had a lot of people that have been like, no, I can't play right now during this time. There's too much stuff going on right now, and this is just another thing that I need to prioritize other things above it.
Yeah, I remember in one of my sessions, like a couple months ago, our DM was like in the middle of describing like this intense action scene, and like Wi-Fi just dropped in the middle of it, and they were just gone, and like the rest of us were just like sitting there like, come back, what happened? And that was really frustrating, because it kind of cut out in the middle of like a really like exciting moment, and then we had to wait for the internet to go back up before we could hop back into it, and it kind of just like killed the hype a little bit.
Oh yeah, that would definitely do it. I've also found a love for props. I've always had a bit of a love for handing out props and things.
It's so fun.
Like, just quick minor story. I ran D&D for my family recently, first time ever. Like, aunt, uncle, mom, dad, brother, cousin, girlfriend, like everyone was there.
There's 7 players in this D&D group.
Yeah.
A lot.
Not the most I've ever run, but yeah, it was interesting, especially because 5 out of 7 had never played before. So it was a full newbie group. And I ended up bringing on this little wooden chest that I bought from Michael's, and I filled it with fake gold coins and like a little note in there that was relevant to the plot of the one shot. And it was so cute handing it around to them and them setting it on the table. And when one person finally opened it, I pulled them up to the DM's table, cracked it open, and showed them what was inside. And they were like, "Oh shit!" And I was like, "Yep, yeah." Props are
It was
great.
a fun time.
That's cool. I remember in one session I ran, I had like a handwritten letter that they found, and I like seeing everyone's faces when I like pulled it out was a good feeling.
Nice. And sorry, mine went blank for just a moment there. There are a lot of D&D involved in media at the moment. I'm sure everyone who's watched Stranger Things knows like they've incorporated D&D into that show. The kids play it, at least in the first season. I think it kind of dies down as the other adventures they're going on take precedent. There's also a lot of popular podcasts and D&D streams going on. And I thought we could talk about those for a little bit. Everyone knows about Critical Role. Dimension 20 are some of the big names. Adventure Zone, I believe.
The
Adventure Zone's
yeah.
pretty big, yeah.
It's very big.
Yeah, I like Critical Role, I do. But I'm so busy working on various projects that I fell behind and can never catch up because that's so much hours commitment. And like, I've tried. I tried both campaigns to catch up from my spots, and I just never could. I love consuming the media, but I can't do it. I don't have the time.
I was pretty fortunate with Critical Role. I managed to I heard about it right after the second campaign started. And by the time I was convinced to like give it a try, they were only like 20 some episodes in, so I managed to catch up, I think, by the end of the year, and then I watched the rest of it like pretty much live as it was happening.
Nice. I am active on Tumblr, and I'd seen Critical Role posts on Tumblr for ages. And when I started playing, I decided I'm going to listen to this. And I started listening to the first campaign and listened to all of it in a couple of months because I have no self-control.
Yeah, same.
I was caught up on the second campaign until somebody wanted to watch them as a couple. And then we had to wait for him to catch up, which has made me fall behind a little bit.
Yeah, I'm not catching up. I'm letting her go off without me. We'll start campaign 3 together, and we will keep up on that shit.
Yeah, I watched the season 2 or the campaign 2 finale live. It was a long night, but it was worth it.
Still haven't seen it. Isn't it like 7 hours?
It's like 7 hours.
7 hours? Week.
It's like like it ended at like 2 a.m.
For a live stream D&D session, that's a long time.
It is, yeah.
I've done, okay, no bragging rights. This was hell. I've done multiple 10 hours.
Why?
Okay, so like D&D story time. The two that come to mind immediately are my main group of 5 had a day off, basically. Actually, more than that. I gave them literally a year of downtime at their high level. And I knew it was going to be a hell of a fucking session. So we planned basically a weekend. And we all sat around the table. We brought a bunch of snacks, bit of alcohol and stuff, and just went to town. I told them, you got 2 weeks, make a bunch of plans. Your character has a year off to accomplish all sorts of things, investigations, building, enchanting, whatever you can think of. We're going to go. You have lots of money. You have lots of magic. Go hard. By the end of it, they had a flying bar. They'd killed a dragon in their off time. Investigated a bunch of different story threads that I dropped earlier. Found some interesting, found some not. What else? One of them contacted their god, got lifted to a plane in their downtime, like all sorts. And then the other one was I was running a solo campaign for my ex-girlfriend who was addicted to D&D. You never see someone truthfully be addicted to D&D. It's weird. It's very strange. But I believe it was for her birthday. she wanted to play D&D all day with only a break for dinner. And so I ran a solo 10 hours, just me and her with her one character. And oof, still one of my claim to fames. That whole session was fantastically well planned. And then my start of D&D with that sort of weird political roleplay game I was talking about, which basically had no rules. We'd play for full weekends. Like, we'd organize once every couple of months. You have to have Saturday, Sunday off. We were all in high school, so it didn't really matter. And we would go over to the guy's house, and we would start as soon as we had breakfast, and we would just play until dinner on Sunday, and people had to leave.
Oh my god, I can't imagine doing that. That's like too much.
No, it was fantastic because of the way it was run. Every turn was private. You would go into a solo room with the DM, the map, your notebook, and your plans. And each turn, per se, was about an in-game month. And as we needed, we bring in other players to discuss actions, moves, trades, and backdoor deals. And then when your turn was over, you'd go outside and you just hang out with the rest of the group while someone else had their turn. We played Halo, we listened to YouTube music videos. Hell, at one point we pulled out a board game and started playing that and would take our turns as regular because a turn took like an hour. So yeah, we needed basically 2 full days to get it through.
I guess that makes sense, but like still.
We were hyper nerds. You don't understand. We hacked the school server at our high school so that we could share music files on school computers and play Pokemon off an emulator, and the teachers still haven't found it to this day.
How do you know they haven't found it to this day?
Because I've taught some younger students who still go to this school where to find it, and it's all still there.
Oh my god.
Hyper nerds.
That's funny.
Wow. That's my boyfriend, everybody.
Cool now, I swear.
Uh-huh.
Sure. Any other D&D podcasts or streams you guys listen to or watch?
I've watched a bit of Dimension 20. One of my friends is really into the Adventure Zone and has tried to get me to listen to it, but I don't do podcasts very well. And I like Critical Role and Dimension 20 because I can like watch them play. And then, yeah, like, you know, adjacent, attached ones to those properties I've also watched.
That is understandable. I do enjoy the when you're watching them, you can see their reactions to what's going on.
It's
and
so
everything.
good. It's so fun.
Like when they do something that even surprises Matt as the DM, and on Critical Role this is, and that you just see him flounder.
It's the like, yeah. There's some really good moments. Yeah, it was. Yeah. Yeah.
Like I said, I'm not good at listening to podcasts. I'm really not. But Lee has been suggesting one to me for a while, and I'm sad she wasn't able to make it as she's traveling. It's just called Not Another D&D Podcast.
I've heard of it. I've heard good things about it.
Fantastic name, firstly, because yes, the market is completely oversaturated on role-playing game podcasts, but I digress. And she keeps trying to entice me with this one meme that's come out of the podcast. And apparently on podcasts early on, they discuss a lot of dragon genitalia. And so she keeps sending me memes about dragon dicks. And this is weird coming from Lee, I'll be entirely honest, but she finds it very enjoyable, and I don't know. If I wanted to watch erotic roleplay, I can also find that somewhere. So I don't really need a D&D podcast there.
That's funny.
Oh, speaking of random tangent, as someone who's very well versed in D&D, erotic D&D sessions are very fucking weird.
Yeah.
I'd imagine.
Like,
Yeah, I would imagine.
yeah, let's get a bunch of friends together to roll dice and get horny. I don't know, man. It was a weird time. Still kind of enjoyable. I'm a very good DM in my opinion, but that was weird.
I mean, the closest that happened in one of my games was when our sorcerer decided they were going to seduce the big bad evil guy.
Classic.
Yep. It was kind of a fade to black moment. Our DM didn't want to actually like role play that, which I totally respect. I didn't really want to sit through that either. Our sorcerer could put a lot of bards to shame, though.
Ooh, this is a good transition. But I do gotta say one thing. If one of my players in like my regular campaign really wants to get some nookie and is like really persistent about it, I will let it happen. But I will not fade to black. You've made me uncomfortable flirting with me in person for this romance you want. I'm going to make you uncomfortable with my ungodly descriptions of what happens in the bedroom.
God.
It was really, in our session, it was really funny because the druid had wild shaped into a cat to make sure the sorceress didn't like die and was hiding underneath the dresser in the room where it happened.
Oof.
It was really funny.
But this brings a good transition to, you said your sorceress will put bards to shame. What do we all think of, like, you know, I'm going to say D&D memes as a general category, but I guess D&D stereotypes would be a much better thing to talk about in our experiences with them. Obviously, the horny bard is one of the biggest, but also like the stupid barbarian, the paladin or cleric mom of the group. These are all big stereotypes in D&D. Yeah, what are you guys' experience with them?
I personally don't have a lot of experience with the actual stereotypes in my groups. We like I said, the sorceress in the one group takes on the typical horny bard stereotype. She's had a couple encounters like that. The monk and the barbarian were more of the gray, morally gray characters that are ready to go out, buy a bunch of drugs, and sell them and murder people, and then frame it on a local crime syndicate.
Murder hobos. Love it.
To an extent, they won't just murder random people, but if you're part of a crime syndicate, you're a cultist, you've got nothing going for you.
Yeah, that's fair.
No, the undying love of Cthulhu? That seems pretty good.
What about you, Alex? Any D&D stereotypes? Or
I think they have their place, like a lot of like tropes, I guess. I think they can be fun to play with. Like, there's definitely like a stupid barbarian in one of my groups. But like they're a really interesting character, and like the way the player like plays them. Like, and then again, we also have a horny bard in one of our groups. But again, I think they have their place to like experiment with and like, you know, go into why a character might be like that, or to like play with the tropes a little bit. But I also like subverting expectations and going the opposite route sometimes, so.
Nice. Yeah, that makes sense. It all has to do with the player playing the character and the group that the character is a part of, I feel. Because if you're in a group that wants to be really, really serious and somebody comes in with kind of a joke character, it's not really going to work out.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, that's one of the biggest things I always say to prospective players or like new groups or anyone asking me questions on D&D is you really have to work together. Like Marie-Soleil said at the beginning, it's a collaborative storytelling game. From its basis, right? Everyone is there telling the story, hearing the story, and participating. And if you make a character that is off-brand, that's fine. Just make sure you work well with everybody else, right?
Yeah.
Group cohesion's the biggest thing I preach.
Yeah.
That's why session zeros are important, so you can actually like talk out what kind of campaign you want to have.
Yeah.
I was actually a part of a campaign where we didn't have a session zero. We all we built our characters together, like all the stats and everything. But then when we created like our characters' backstories and their motivations and everything, nothing synced together. So then when we tried to play, we had no reason for this to be an adventuring party. We were all just random people who were tossed together. And our the DM at the moment she said that just create your characters and I'll make it work into the story, but it didn't really work into the story, and the group kind of fell apart because, well, my character, for one, had no reason to go off fight dragons when she could just go home. She didn't like anybody in the group. They were all really, like, everybody was really not working together.
Yeah, there was in like one of my ongoing campaigns, there was like our party was together for quite a while. And like it worked for the most part, but then it got to the point where one of the characters ended up leaving just because the player couldn't find a reason for him to like still be with the party with like conflicting morals and stuff. So yeah, that kind of stuff is always a little sad.
It is. As someone who's played a lot and had a lot of groups fall through, it's never a good feeling. I'm currently in the midst of that right now. Like I said, with me dropping the I can't play online bomb to my main group, I'm kind of sitting on like, yeah, we should probably just disband this. The story's long past, and it's not something I want to rehash at this point, just because it's now been almost a year since we've played with those characters, and I've moved on to some extent, as sad as it is. But again, it happens. It's like when you haven't spoken to a friend in a long while. Sometimes you're on just two different paths, and that happens.
Yeah.
But less on sad, we also brought up starting groups. For me, I want to hear what everyone's opinion like on how to start groups. It's always been friends. I've never answered like an online posting. I've kind of wanted to, just to see what it's like, but I worry about expending that creative energy and getting burned out again on something that's not going to last, you know? Mostly it's friends approaching me like, hey, we hear you do role-playing games and stuff like that. You want a group? Or like significant others who want to play, or like I said, my family. Never been truly a group of randoms to any extent for me. And I guess I'm lucky that way. I know some D&D players do not get that.
Interesting. My groups, like, they always start with friends, like you were saying. Like my first group, it started out like me and the DM were both in the same club, the Historical Society. Technically, I only really showed up to their Wednesday meetings. I never really went to the other the events that they had. They had beer congress, they called it, at the bar on campus, and it was fun to just hang out and talk to them about random things. And my DM was there, and we had started talking. They mentioned D&D, and I was like, I've always been interested in playing, and I joined their group that had already been playing for a while. And any other group that I've started has always been with friends. Like the one that kind of fell apart, my old roommate was the DM to it. I was in a group that my ex-boyfriend was running, and again, that fell apart. And yeah, currently Tyler's running a campaign for me and some of our friends that is kind of on hiatus right now because we've just been really busy, partially with the fact that we're moving and everything else going on. But it's always been friends. I do have a friend who made his group through Kijiji. He basically posted and was like, hey, I want to play D&D. Anybody interested in this? And found enough people that were willing to play, and a man who, the DM for that group ended up being a man who'd been playing since like first edition came out and had stopped playing D&D for a while, but when he saw this post of all of these like 20-something-year-olds who were looking for a DM, he was like, yeah, I'll give it another shot. And they ended up playing for about a year or so before COVID hit, and then again kind of fell apart with the pandemic.
Damn. Well, my first game that I was like invited to play was it was someone that I'd like a classmate, the classmate that asked like if I'd ever played before. Some months after this happened, he texted me out of nowhere, was like, hey, did you still want to play a game? Because I'm setting one up and I'm looking for players. So I was like, yeah, sure. And I didn't know like anyone else in the group. So, you know, I like showed up, didn't really know anybody. But I'm still playing with that group, and I would consider myself at least like friendly with all of them. But then pretty much every other group I've played with has been like friends, close friends, or like friends of friends that have become friends now.
Nice.
So
Sounds
apparently
like
we're
fun.
all lucky because I do talk with a lot of other people about ending up playing with randoms, and apparently it's way more common just because of, the necessities of trying to find a group and all that. All right.
There are a lot of resources for finding groups online, though. Sorry
There
to
is.
interrupt what you were going to say, but like Roll20, I know has forums and everything that you can post about wanting to DM a group or wanting to join a group. And I've seen apps on the App Store about just to join a group online, like over the app and to play on this app and everything.
Yeah, I'm not comfortable enough talking with people I don't know to do that. So
Oh yeah, me neither.
See, I'm sure I could, just with experience and stuff. But like I said, I'm afraid to put the energy commitment in. I've always wanted to try, but I'm very afraid to put that energy commitment in story. Because you never know what you get. And I've read some hella horror stories about some bad players, had a few bad players myself, but the world's a big place. A lot of people want to play the game, especially now with the influence of all these podcasts and just how big D&D is getting in media. It's invited a huge influx of new players, even not just to D&D, to roleplay in general, right?
yeah.
The fact that we have D&D Funko Pops about celebrity characters is just mind-boggling to me. If you'd have told me this was going to happen like 8 years ago, I'd have been like, bullshit. No one likes nerds that much. Bullshit. And here we are.
That reminds me of like, there's a stereotype around D&D players, and I don't know if you've run into this, Alex, but I've, as so a female identifying person myself, I've had people look me in the face and been like, I don't see a lot of pretty girls that play D&D. And I've had people not take me serious when they've seen, like when I've mentioned that I play D&D, or they brush it off. And there's this weird, or people are like, D&D is still a thing? Like if they're not involved in it already, kind of thing.
I've never like run into someone that has said that kind of thing personally, but I see it online a lot. Because I'm also on Tumblr, and Tumblr always gets the fun discourse from Twitter, and stuff. So like I see it a lot. There's a lot of gatekeepers in the community, I think, and yeah, so there's a lot of, and then from an outside perspective, I think a lot of people don't like get it, like if they've never played it or if they don't really understand it. It does seem like a weird thing, I guess.
It is kind of daunting, role-playing, right? And I'm glad it's become more accessible, because I'm very much not a gatekeeper. I had some talks with Lee about this the other day, off podcast. I'm part of some of the most elitist communities in the world, I'll be entirely honest. Goths are super elitist, and I really try to not. Every subculture and hobby should be inclusive. But at the same time, when you become very open and inclusive, you let a lot of bad in too. So people that want to gatekeep can now get access and treat it like their own private club. And it also lets in, to use a no better term, bad players. That guys and the like. And I've played with several at this point. And it's just kind of a risk. When things get big, I'm really glad it's more inclusive and a lot of people can get in, but that means we're not letting in the best people either, right?
Yeah.
That reminds me of this TikToker who does toxic player stories, and it started out with her own stories of being in a campaign where there was the person who was dating the DM was just a toxic player but got away with it because they're dating the DM. And then people were suggesting, like, telling her stories that were happening to them that had happened to them in the comments. So she started doing little skits about other people's stories and everything, and her page on TikTok blew up. I can't remember what her handle is, but yeah.
Speaking of toxic player stories, anyone got any fun ones they want to share with the group?
I don't personally have any toxic player stories, but like I've been in groups where somebody realized, hey, my character is not working in this group. We had in my main group, we have one person who's playing a wizard tiefling that was neutral evil or something. His character sheet just said N evil, and he joked that it was not evil, but we all knew. And they realized, like, this character has no reason to fight with our group against these evil gods we were fighting, so they retired him and have picked up a different character now.
You encountered any of the trash, Alex?
Actually, I have not. Most of my groups have been pretty tight knit. I do have one story that I think you might find kind of funny, Tyler, which is when I first started up my group, I had 3 players. One of them was like a friend of mine who is a very, very religious, like a Christian. And so she kind of started
this is starting great. Yep, let's go.
Yeah. But yeah, so it started out like pretty good. She enjoyed her character. Wasn't like quite as into the roleplay as everyone else, but was like still enjoying herself. And then like a month or 2 later, she texts me out of the blue and goes, "Hey, I can't play D&D anymore." And I'm like, "Oh, okay, why? What happened?" And she's just like, "Well, basically, I went to this thing and it was talking about like mindfulness and stuff, and D&D came up at this thing I was at, and apparently it invites demons into your life, and I can't do that because of like her religion, so I can't play anymore."
Alrighty, so I wasn't going to hit this topic quite so early in the podcast, but let's talk about the satanic panic.
My.
All right. So, as an avid participating Satanist, heavy metal enthusiast, and D&D player, I do all the things that Christians hate. And the fact that people were persecuted and jailed because they played D&D, and the overly Christian media and governments decided that this was not a good Christian activity is sickening. Playing a game got people thrown in fucking jail. That's like if COD was suddenly banned and all these dude bros, like my brother in the background, suddenly got jailed. My house would definitely be quiet, but I think I'd miss my brother. Like, it's insane that this whole religious fervor existed and focused mainly on 2 things, which was heavy metal music and D&D. And as people who've played D&D, how many demons are in your 2 bodies? I can't speak for myself. It's a lot, but how about you 2?
The jury's out on that one. I can't tell you that as a practicing witch and a pagan.
Got a lot of demons there, Alex?
You know what? I still don't have a demon girlfriend, so I don't think it's working out the way I'd like it to.
Oof, yeah. Where's my succubus GF? How dare. But yeah, speaking as a demon-possessed individual, no demons in D&D, surprisingly little.
I saw this story on Reddit where they, coming from a very Christian background, still wanted to play D&D. So instead of using like the different gods and such, there was just the main god, and then there were the saints, that you could be a cleric of a saint, so that they could just still go with the different cleric domains and such, but you weren't like a cleric of a pagan god. You were a cleric to Saint Valentine or something.
Yeah, fuck them snakes. Kidding.
I mean, that's an interesting way to do it, though.
Yeah, if you really want to include Christianity in yet another media form, my goodness. I almost said my God there, but I'd be referencing a very different God to the Christian one, so I decided not to.
I mean, I'm right here.
Oh, yes. Yes, my dear deity, yes. I don't know. I don't think saying, oh, Alex will have the same ring. I think people will get the wrong impression.
That's fair.
All right, but we're talking about God and sexy D&D again, so let's stop that. Back to toxic players. Whoo boy, I got a little doozy of a player. So one of the things I did try for a while was doing Adventure League, which is offered by a lot of local game stores around the world. And I do like it for getting people into the hobby. I know a lot of people have found groups from it. Adventure League, for those of you that don't know, is predetermined adventures that are handed out with the seasons that D&D releases books in through Wizards of the Coast, their main publisher and company. I believe the first and fifth edition was like Curse of Strahd. Don't quote me on this. I didn't play Curse of Strahd yet. But each adventure module they put out, they will typically run a season of Adventure League relating to it. And DMs will come and volunteer for groups of players that are completely random, and they'll usually get gift cards and points towards things for doing this, and run a group. And I once played in one of those groups for a while. Got in at the end of a season. I had fun, no doubt. DM was good, but there was one gentleman. Not going to list any names, but they were very much what I would consider a that guy, which is a large overarching term for a variety of bad players. Very much center of attention. If I think of a funny joke, even though the DM is in the middle of a monologue, I'm going to say it. I'm going to interrupt, ruin whatever tension they were trying to build. We're having a scene with another character's backstory coming up, and they're really getting into it. But the scene's not on me. So I'd better start talking and better get in this as best I can. And that's just roleplay wise. Combat was much of the same. We're fighting wolves. The druid turns into a wolf to fight back. My dude pops out of a tent. It's like, I see a wolf, I slash at it. And DM's like, all right, that's your druid. And he tells him straight up, you know it's your druid. You've seen him turn into this wolf many times. You know he has this ability. Why would you do that? He's like, I just woke up. I'm panicked. I'm going to slash at my friend. He's like, all right, this is Adventure League. You literally can't do any PvP, so you just miss. And he's like, okay, cool. I use both my attacks and I just end the turn. Instead of usefully participating at all. And that's just one of many stories about this gentleman. And it's not even the worst, because I don't think I want to share the worst. I'll be honest. Yeah, that guy's. I prefer edgelords to that guys even, because at least edgelords are kind of predictable.
That being said, not all Adventure League tables are bad. I've never been to them, but I have a couple of friends that like swear by it. Was one of their favorite things to do. They'd go out like on Wednesday nights. I think was when our local ones were happening, but they had regular tables. So they knew all of the players at their table, and it was always those players because they'd fill the table with those people. And so they were able to build that cohesion in their group. One of them did tell me a story about one guy who joined their table who wouldn't follow like the rules they had set out. So one of those rules was their stats for D&D characters. There are multiple ways to create the stats, but there's a point by, which is what everybody else at the table used, except this gentleman had rolled their stats, even though they were told not to. So his stats were a lot higher than the others, at like 18s at the very beginning. But otherwise, like that table was really good and such. It all depends on who you end up with.
Yeah, and that's why, there's a bit of randomness involved. I'd still like to try it. I'm just scared. Just scared is all. But you bring up another interesting point, unless, Alex, you have a story to share.
No, I was just gonna say, I think, jumping off that, I do think D&D is about who you play with. And it's gonna be a different experience if you have like a group that you don't work well with, it's not going to be fun. And I think an important part about having fun with D&D is finding people that you play well with.
Oh, definitely. And I preached before, like group cohesion, and as Marie-Soleil said, session 0. As a DM, I kind of accept resumes from players to some extent when forming groups, and not like, oh, this is how many years I've had and stuff like that. It's more like, what type of games do I want to play? What type of stories do I want to tell? Tell me about those, and let me work those together into the campaign, right? It's like, it's not so much a character sheet as a player sheet telling me about the type of stories you like to tell, which is a very important aspect of, again, a collaborative storytelling game.
That is smart. Oh, and also, like, I've seen a lot of people doing stuff like that, and also talking about like what would trigger them if it showed up in a game and such, so that the DM knows what to avoid bringing into their game.
Limits, very important, especially nowadays. Having limits on games, hard limits, soft limits, and stuff like that is very important. And I've seen a lot of backlash against the inclusion of this, because I believe even some of the most recent manuals have come out with like the X card rule. I don't know how much either of you have heard about that.
I've heard it before, but
I
Alex?
have not.
Okay, so it's basically a safe word for D&D. You have a little card with an X on it, and if the DM is doing something or a player is doing something that is a hard limit for you, or you didn't know it was a hard limit, or it's a scene that's making you uncomfortable, you can pass them this X card, which is signaling typically a halt to the game or a lessening of detail, depending on, the player and DM agreement. I've never used an X card. Most of my groups were open enough that if I'm doing something that you don't like, you just straight up tell me. But I think it's a wonderful rule to include with how widespread the game is now, especially if we've got players who are nervous, new, shy, and don't feel comfortable speaking up about, like, hey, this is not making me feel good, this is making me very uncomfortable. I think being able to have that little thing, like texting also works, obviously, but if the DM doesn't check their phone and continues the scene, you could end up in a bad position. So there's a little X card that you can just like pass under the table to your DM to be like, hey, I need a moment for this one. This one's too hard. This one's too far. Can we change this up? I think that's wonderful. And as a DM, I would love to know if something I said is fucking you up and you don't want it, because that is not the point of me playing a game. It's really not. I'm here to make everyone have fun and be comfortable. So this inclusion of X card in like actual written rules for D&D itself, I think it's fantastic.
Yeah, that sounds good.
I agree. That does sound like a good rule.
So much backlash, though. All the old gatekeepers were like, no, you signed up for this story. This is what we're doing. And I'm like, dude, you are abusing people's characters and their trust. You need to chill. This game's supposed to be fun for everyone, not just for you, you sadistic prick.
Yep,
that makes sense to me. D&D has changed a lot, though. Like, I got this book about, I can't remember what it's called, but it's about combat tactics and stuff in D&D. So basically how, like, teaching you how the best ways to play your characters, so to speak, in combat and such. So you just so you know what you can do and what you can't do. And it was explaining how, like, in the first editions of D&D, there were so many rules about, like, what races could play what classes and the stats you had to do. Like, I guess barbarians were originally illiterate. Like, all barbarians were illiterate. They couldn't read, was literally a rule.
First edition was a weird time, okay, but continue.
And now it's gotten to a point where it's like, you want to play like a Goliath's wizard, who's kind of the nerd of D&D. Wizards are pretty much nerds of D&D. Wizards and monks. And Goliaths are like giants and typically more meat-headed so to speak, that's totally fine. You can play whatever you want.
Yeah, I did a research paper about like diversity and like inclusion in D&D for a class last year. And so that was one of the things that came up was like how like races especially, and like even the term races is a questionable one, honestly, but like how they've become like less restrictive over time and less like defined by like certain rules. Because if you go scroll through like different playable races, there'll be a section where it's like, oh, this is this society that this race lives in, they tend to be like evil because of this, blah blah blah. Which is something that one of my bigger issues with D&D is the alignment system. But then a lot of people will kind of not really play with that because they disagree with it or it doesn't really add anything to their game. And then even with, I know when Tasha's Cauldron of Everything came out, they kind of included a new rule where you didn't necessarily have to follow the ability score stuff that goes with each races. How like certain ones are going to give you like strength and con because they're the big ones, but if those don't line up with the class you want to play, you can change those to whatever you think suits your character better.
Yes. Oh my god, I'm glad you brought up Tasha's. I love that rule.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting to like look back on how restrictive everything used to be and how it's slowly becoming like more and more open, and allows for a lot more like diverse and interesting characters, I think.
I agree, and I'm going to tell a quick story for Lee because Lee isn't here, and this is the exact point that Lee would share it. Lee, if you're listening to this, and you would better be, you're welcome. So, Lee started playing D&D, and she's played D&D most of her life with her family. Her dad was an old school nerd and would play with her and her sisters and her mother. And they played old editions of D&D to start, where Drow were not a player character race. You could not play Drow. Dark Elves, for anyone who's listening and doesn't know. And that's because they were a monster race. And these were old restrictive times with old viewpoints. But I think it was 3.5 or 4 Drow suddenly became a playable race in a supplement. And now in 5th edition, they're straight up in the regular player's handbook. You can play a Dark Elf. And she tells that her entire family has played Dark Elves all the time now to spite their father, who wouldn't let them play at the beginning of D&D. And it's become, she thought it would be a problem because she's running a family campaign right now. And she was like, I'm betting that all of my sisters are going to play Drow. And I'm just going to have an Underdark Drow campaign because we all want that forbidden fruit. And she herself loves Drow, knows most of the histories and the Forgotten Realms. I think she's read the Drizzt novels of R.A. Salvatore. I know I was building an Underdark campaign for a solo with her for a while there, so yeah. Drow are a very interesting case in, D&D used to be restrictive and a little bit overtly racist, and I'm really glad we're getting out of that. Just a little. I mean, they're dark elves who live in the underground and no one's allowed to play them because they're straight up evil. Yeah, just a little.
Drow are great, though. I'm a big fan of them.
I love my matriarchal murder sex cult. Also spiders.
I don't love spiders.
Me neither.
I like spiders. Lolthus Bay.
Almost gave up my apartment to a spider once.
Burn it down. You have another topic, or Marie-Soleil? Because I had an interesting point to bring.
I think this is the last topic. So we talked a bit about D&D podcasts before, and the big one that we talked about, Critical Role. A lot of people have talked about the Matt Mercer effect, which is the effect where people who join a D&D group expect their dungeon master, their DM, to be Matt Mercer, who is a professional voice actor, incredibly talented, and has a lot of funds behind their campaign. And that's talking about how, like, is that an actual belief that players have, or is that just hogwash. And I thought we could talk about that tonight. And my personal opinion is that it's an actual belief people have that is unrealistic. You can't expect anybody to be able to pull off what he can do with their budget and their equipment and their history. They've been playing D&D, not DM. They've been playing D&D for years, for ages, and they've been playing together for a while. It's a team of professional actors playing D&D on Critical Role. And if you're not going to come in with the same enthusiasm and role-playing skills as Travis or Marisha, then you can't really expect your DM to come in with the abilities of Matt Mercer.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
So I'm going to preface this by saying I'm way better of a DM than Matt Mercer. So yeah, there's that.
Ha.
Just you wait.
Oh, I'm so scared.
Stop flirting with me on podcast.
You're the one who made it flirting. Anyway, continue.
Anyway, but I've definitely experienced the Matt Mercer effect firsthand. At least two of my players in one of my groups had literally just watched Critical Role. In fact, that is how the one member of the group had got them into D&D and got them wanting to play, was by showing them Critical Role. And I'm a very descriptive DM. I'm good at balanced out combat. I know 99% of the rules, but also follow the rule of cool and am open, especially in like a high fantasy plot-driven campaign style. I'm okay at including character backstories, but I don't have the time or a team of writers behind me to create 17 different plot points within one city that you can follow each of them. And if I forget the reason why you have a letter to a child with your last name for 20 sessions and then you find it in a bag of holding, you're like, where does this lead? I don't know either, dude. Why didn't you follow that story thread? You dropped it, I dropped it. Sorry.
Yeah, that's fair. I don't know. I also got into D&D through Critical Role for the most part, but like, I don't think I ever really experienced that, especially because like, maybe it was because going into most of the D&D games I've played, I knew, like I was a new player, other people were also new players, so I think that definitely helped to level my expectations. But also, like, again, these people are like extremely well-known voice actors. Like, I've casually mentioned the names of some of them around some of my nerdier friends before, and they've been like, "Wait, that person plays D&D on Critical Role?" And I'm like, "Yeah, they do." So I think even having that in my head, I was able to be like, "Well, I'm never gonna find people that play like that," you know.
Excuse me, I'm right here.
Tyler aside.
Also a horrible narcissist. Continue.
Yeah, I've picked up on that a little bit. It's okay. I'm literally called God on here. Like, you can't get much more self-centered than that.
Praise be Alex.
But yeah, I think that definitely helped to level my expectations. Was just being like, you know, this is Matthew Mercer, who even I had heard of before watching Critical Role, and I'm not into like the voice acting world at all. Like, I don't follow video games or anything like that very much, and even I had heard of him. So, like, you know, at that point, if it's someone like that who's like that notorious for that kind of stuff, like, yeah, the chances of finding someone on that level in the wild it's not gonna happen.
In the wild? What is this, Pokemon? I walk through the tall grass. Matt
Gotta
Mercer.
catch them all.
You know what I mean, though.
Sam Riegel, I choose you. Anyways. No, I just love that term. Yeah, Matt Mercer effect. I think it polluted a lot of people's opinions of a game that's supposed to, well, initially started out as, you know, this is a fun little thing we do around the kitchen table. Everybody hang out and have fun and be casual. And it's good. It is good to bring it into the wider media. But I think we've reached an almost critical mass point where it's like, not to rant about capitalism on a podcast about D&D right now, but the idea that you have to be the best at something to be able to monetize it instead of just having fun doing something and not being perfect at it is annoying. And it goes for all art forms, not just D&D, for music, drawing, voice acting even. Like, you can be a minor voice actor as a hobby. You just gotta find an agent and submit a few files of you voice acting, and you can do it. It's not that hard. But again, the idea that you have to be able to be the best of the best, or no one's going to want to play with you, it's just wrong. It's a lie told to us by a lot of things, but it's wrong.
Yeah, if you want to play D&D, you got to go in with an open mind, because people don't always have the time to create the extensive maps that you'll see. Like, on Critical Role, and I think even Dimension 20, they have a team backing them. They've got sponsors, they have artists and crews and stuff to help them create these worlds and such.
Yeah.
Whereas your average run-of-the-mill DM does not have that backing.
Yeah.
Sorry, run-of-the-mill? I think you mean DMs out in the wild. We're out hunting, okay? We're hunting those quality plot lines and NPCs that you love so much.
Do the players hunt the DMs, or do the DMs hunt the players?
Depends which one's the more dangerous game.
I mean, DMs don't have stats. You can't really fight them.
Players have tried.
Tried being the key word.
I know that was the last topic on your list, but I've got a few little points.
Oh yeah, and we've got more time to talk too. Like, if you've got points you want to discuss, bring them up.
So, I think it's D&D hot take time. And I think we've got some polarizing opinions. So, like, that alignment chart, Alex.
Mm-hmm.
I have been in every camp about alignment charts, and I think that they need to remain in D&D. They're a relic, yes, but I don't think the point of the alignment chart was ever to stick someone into an archetype, right? I think that's what a lot of people see the alignment chart as, which is where we get, remove the alignment chart. It's not necessary in D&D. I'm playing a character. It is a guideline, just like in 5th edition of the Player's Handbook, if you go to your backgrounds, you've got tables you can roll on or pick from to choose mild character motivations and stuff like that, right? I can play a neutral evil wizard that is still good with the party, that knows their place in the greater scheme, but is truthfully neutral evil, either because of mindset, because of personal action, because of something in backstory, etc. But if I don't have something neutral evil to call them, and evil is perspective, right? Whether it be evil to someone in their backstory, evil in their own mindset, or evil to the player that's playing them, I think it's good to have that moniker, to have down on a sheet, right? All right. I've won the argument. Got it. Perfect. Yep. Everyone use the alignment chart.
I guess to an extent I see the ways in which it's useful. I do feel like it's just calling characters good or evil just feels icky and weird to me, and sometimes I I get the guideline thing as well. It's just sometimes I feel like I've played characters where I don't really know where I would fit them on the chart, and in that sense I find it kind of restrictive as well.
Yeah, see, I agree with you, Alex. I've never really been able to place one of my characters on the alignment chart. Other people seem to be able to place the characters I've played on it, but I haven't been able to. And I find it if I was playing a character and they did something and then my DM was like, okay, your alignment changes towards more evil because of this action you took, I don't know how I would feel about that too. Like, and I know that's happens in some people's games. It's happened on Critical Role, where in the Vox Machina campaign, where they were moved more towards the evil side.
Spoilers, excuse me. Not all.
I'm not telling you the incident where it happened. Sheesh.
It's okay. This is what, 2 years old news now. I think it's okay.
Vox Machina is a lot older than that.
This is a lot older. This is like pretty early in the first campaign too.
Time is an illusion. Continue.
And I don't know how I'd feel about somebody else telling me, hey, your character is more evil than they were before because you decided to steal that or something.
Yeah, I don't know. I think it can be useful to an extent, but I also don't know if it's necessary, I guess, is my stance on it.
Maybe it's like a diving board. It gives you, like, it helps you get that jump, but then the rest of it's on you.
Yeah.
I like the diving board analogy, but I like to think of a lot of the rules within the DMG and PHB sort of as, and I'm going to use a weird term, but a leash with new players specifically, right? It teaches you to make a character if you've never done it before. Learning about the alignment system and how to stick into a role play and create a character that is, to some extent, a facet of personality, right? With its own beliefs, wants, needs, and things. And I think the issue with doing away with alignment is you end up with a lot of the chaotic neutral that guy characters. And I've seen dozens of them, dozens of that. Oh, I'm chaotic neutral. I can murder a baby, but then go praise the god that likes me, and no ill will befall me. None whatsoever. Because it's what my character would do. What do you mean killing that baby was evil? It's what my character would do. And that line hurts me more than any other in D&D. Because most of the time, no. That ain't what your character would do. That's what the screaming monkey in your head said you would do. And that's why I think the alignment chart is necessary. It's training wheels, right? More experienced players, I'd be like, yeah, go hard. You don't need an alignment. I trust your ability. But new players, unvetted players, it helps.
I'm just confused by your example, because isn't that an example of the alignment chart not being useful?
Chaotic neutral should be stricken from the alignment chart. Every other alignment's fine. To some extent, yes. And like I said, I've been in both camps about the alignment chart. Because, chaotic neutral's weird. But even for a newbie, picking chaotic neutral and then doing that's what my character would do, if you have a good DM, they should use that as a lesson for the new player, right? And I've trained lots of people in D&D at this point. And, the alignment chart has helped more than hindered. Is it because I try to describe chaotic neutral in a bad way so that no new player ever picks them? Maybe. Maybe I'm biased. But I digress. It's a relic. Like hit points are a relic and AC is a relic. But it still needs to stay.
I guess.
Fair enough.
Next hot take. Do we roll characters? Do we point by? Or do we standard array?
I've done all three, and I honestly like rolling best.
I've also done, I think I've done rolling in standard array for actual gameplay, but I've created characters using point by as well. And I agree, rolling the characters ends up for a lot more variety in the stats, and it's kind of, I think it's fun. But I do see how, if you're playing with other, if it's a new campaign that you're joining and these are new players, point by and standard array can help it be more balanced than rolling.
Oh yeah, that's why I used it for the one shot that I ran.
Yeah.
Also, it's just easier because we're all online anyway.
Yeah, and you don't have you don't have to worry about people fudging the rules. Like, and I know you want to trust everybody not to do that, but like I was in a game once when I was gonna run a one shot with this group, and one of the guys asked me to roll his stats for him so that we would all know he didn't cheat, because I guess he got called out on somebody thinking he cheated on his stats in a previous game.
So, once again, I am a relic. It's standard array or nothing. It is the fairest, in my opinion. The most even, so your character is never left completely detrimental, but with still having a fair playing ground. And you can still make interesting characters. And making that choice of why this stat is lower than the others, why this one is dumped, why this one is slightly higher, is so much more interesting to me playing within that rule set than, say, point buy, where I can just maximize what I want to maximize and say fuck the rest, or rolling. And I have a love-hate relationship with rolling. I really do. Because I do rolling with modified rules. So I know I think the original way you played D&D in first edition was you would pick a stat, so pick strength, and then you'd roll your 3d6, and that would be your strength score. And then you'd go on to con and so forth. It's been modified since that you roll, you write that number down, you roll, you write that number down, and then you place them as you please. I prefer that. Obviously, the first edition was very restrictive. I also do like, all right, you can add 1 point here if you take away a point from another dice roll. You can also switch 2 dice between the different rolls to do like a little more customization. But when I get into those house rules, trying to make everyone's character be exactly what they want, trying to adjust rolling, I always find I probably should have just used standard array to begin with. And I love standard array. The fairness it creates and the ability for customization within a rule set. If we get to talking about how we make characters, like, that's my entire mantra, quite literally.
I feel like we all agree that stats should not be rolled using a d20, though.
No.
For a one shot, maybe, but only for a one shot.
I didn't know that was a thing until I ended up on D&D TikTok, and then I realized that some people actually roll their stats by just rolling a d20 6 times.
I have done that once. When I first started, I didn't realize you're supposed to use d6s, so I was like, oh, 20s. Just because I was like, well, it ranges up to 20, so I figured that was what we were supposed to use. I realized very quickly that that's not a good one to use.
Yeah, that makes sense. Because you could get a 1 in your stat. How that would suck to have a 1 as one of your stats.
Yeah, that would suck a lot.
Be a very interesting role play. But now I want to do a one shot where everyone rolls a d100. Just see how that would. A demigod's one shot.
That would be so fun. Not gonna lie.
That would be different, right? That'd be different. Or maybe not a d100, maybe like a d60 or something, but something just absurd, and see what that's like. So yeah, I'm a standard array. I love the the alignment charts. I don't like hit points, and I don't like AC. I'll be entirely honest.
Why?
So, leveling up in a class does not necessarily translate to your body being able to take more punishment. I realize why hit points are needed. I really do. But to me, it's a relic. It's such an abstraction of the concept of health and like physical well-being that I've seen it done in a lot of ways. I'll talk about a different system right now called Blades in the Dark, which is a system for basically a party entirely made up of rogues. Very interesting system. Very narrative heavy. It's very good, right?
It was a long time ago, so I don't remember it very well. But yeah, I enjoyed it.
It's a system with a lot of fluff and not a lot of crunch. And crunch being mechanical specificity, whereas fluff is more narrative. And Blades in the Dark does injury very interesting. Your DM will give you injuries after you reach certain levels of character stress or based on certain events. And it's not like a hit point injury, it's either a major or a minor injury. You fail this lockpick, your hand slips and you get cut. Minor injury, have a cut hand. You go into a combat, you're fighting with swords, and you get another injury. Well, instead of saying, oh, I lost 10 hit points, your cut hand now becomes a missing finger, a major injury. And there's variance on how this is done, but that's a general gist of it. And that's a lot more, I hate to use the term realistic, but it's a lot less abstract than just saying, oh, I lost 10 hit points. Oh, I lost 15 hit points. Oh, I lost 6 hit points. Healer, I'm at 40 hit points. Heal me soon, right? It feels so gamey, like we're playing a video game. And again, I realized most video games initially were based off of old D&D, and I've played a bunch of them too. But for someone who's very role-play, immersion-focused, HP and AC, which I can talk about a bit later, really ripped me out of it.
That makes sense.
Yeah, that's interesting. I've never heard that before.
I did play a game called Liminal. Is a role-playing game that I played that used endurance points instead of hit points. And you could go into the negatives, but I can't exactly remember all of the rules about it. But it wasn't so much like once you hit negatives, you had like not disadvantage, but your rolls, it was harder for you to try to complete the skills. And I'd know it more if I played it more, but I tried to run 2 different games of Liminal and it fell apart both times. So
It's weird trying to get people to play other games besides D&D nowadays, but I digress.
yeah.
I mean, I've played a few others. Some of them are fun.
Oh, I agree. I've made it a study of different game systems, like different dice systems, skill resolution systems. I love seeing what things come up with, and there's some very interesting ones. Like Warhammer 40,000, their role-playing games typically use a D100 system, which is super interesting as a percentile-based system, and very well done, I will say. But this leads me to a talk about AC and its abstraction really quickly, because it's another thing I kind of dislike about D&D. Wearing plate mail. So, like, your AC is 18, which is really high for those of you that don't know. That means if someone rolls and gets a 19, they hit you and deal damage. So does that mean this dagger pierced through this plate mail? Tinged off of it if he misses? Or does he just whiff if he gets below an 18? And again, it's one of those abstractions, because if we look at how, again, real armor works, you still get hit while you're in real armor, but it doesn't damage you as much. And as such, I've debated adding an alternate rule in for AC in my home games, where your AC is just how hard you are to hit. And that's based on your dexterity, which is already a true fact for if you're not wearing armor or if you're a monk or a barbarian. But if you do end up getting hit, instead of AC being based on your armor, since that person has now hit you, bypassed your dexterity, your armor now reduces the damage you take. So if they hit you with a dagger, but you're wearing full plate mail, the full plate mail will reduce a lot of the damage from the dagger, but you will be easier to hit because you're wearing plate mail and not able to dodge as efficiently. And again, talking about realism with role-playing games is a slippery slope, but it's one I tread very heavily. And that exact system I just described is what the Warhammer 40k system uses, or at least one or two of them do. And in playing it, it made the combats a lot more tense and interesting for me. Because, okay, do I want to not get hit as much, or do I want to reduce the damage if I do get hit? It's allowing player agency in a bit of the randomness that is involved in the game, of getting hit or not and how much damage that deals. And it allows you to I think add another level of customization to a character. That equipment and D&D I find is lacking. Woo, talking Tyler's homebrew rants now.
I understand where you're coming from in that, because it's something I've also thought about a bit too. But like that, if we were going to do it the way you're describing, that puts a lot more time and effort into this. Where with just armor class, it makes it a lot easier for people to just pick up the game and create their character and stuff. And I feel like with your homebrew rules, you have to be very invested to go that far into it.
Very invested, you say. Yup, that's me. But I digress. I've ranted now about 2 fucking system complaints. Anyone else have any points on system?
I can't think of anything that I'd complain about system-wise. What about you, Alex?
I can't think of anything either.
The hyper nerd is coming out in me. This is great. In that case, favorite class or character that you've ever built or like that you want to build? I know Marie-Soleil wanted to talk about this, so I'll shut up for a bit and you could go off.
So I really want to play a bard at some point. I haven't gotten the chance to it, but I've created about 5 different bards that I want to play. And Tyler won't let it drop that I want to play a bard, that I keep making bards that are all different. But I will eventually play one of them. I've created a bard that it would have to be like the way I thought of it would be human variant with I can't remember. I think it's martial weapons feat, where she would get proficiency with whips, and she would use them as skipping ropes. And all of her spells we cast using old skipping rhymes.
That's so cute. Oh my god.
Thank you. And every time she'd go to fight, before starting the fight, she would challenge them to a double dutch contest.
That sounds like a great character. I love it.
Thank you. What's a character idea that you want to play?
I have a lot.
Ditto.
In terms... What?
Ditto. It's the DM's dilemma. Continue.
Yeah, no, I have quite a few. I don't know. In terms of like classes I tend to be drawn to, I love rangers. I know no one else likes rangers, but I really like playing rangers. And I also like rogues, but like
I've played a ranger.
Everyone likes rogues, so that's not surprising.
Rogues are cool because of the sneak attack damage. Rangers are also kind of cool. They can be played well. They're the original ranger stats were a bit limited because like there is the favored terrain and favored creatures or something.
Favored enemy.
Prey. Yes, enemy. That's the term. But that limited you. Like if your favorite terrain was the forest, but your DM had like a coastal campaign planned, you basically would be you wouldn't be able to use any of your special abilities.
Yeah, that's why, again, like, since I started playing, like, my first character that I created was a ranger. And, like, again, I was really new at the time, so I was just, like, going through D&D Beyond, like, oh, and this is what I do. And he was like, no, use the revised ranger, it's better. And I was like, oh, okay. So ever since then, I've been using that, because, yeah, the way they fixed the, like, natural explorer feature, and that is, like, a lot better.
Very much, from what I can tell, yeah.
Yeah, you get fewer favorite enemies with it, but also like if you choose humanoids, you get all humanoids instead of having to choose 2 specific ones. So,
ooh, that's cool.
Yeah, so I really like playing rangers. I found that I tend to be drawn to like the dex-based classes most. Like I like playing fast characters basically. Or Like, one of my main characters right now is a swashbuckler. And I like the ability to like be able to go in, stab, and then get out without getting hit. Like that's really fun. And then I like the rangers because I can shoot from a distance. I don't like being in the midst of combat, I guess. I don't like playing like the tanks so much. I definitely prefer the like faster dex-based classes.
I get that. My rogue never gets directly into the fray. Tiffany has a pair of flying boots that she uses when she remembers them. Liberally.
Yeah.
So I know.
What about you, Tyler?
Well, I know Marie-Soleil just spoke of a character that she wants to play that she made. Alex, do you have any on the back burner that are like really interesting concepts that you want to share?
That's a good question. Like, who are my backups right now? I have an elf wizard in the works that I'm kind of excited about. Just like based on like backstory wise. But I don't know if I'll ever get to play him. We'll see.
That is fair, and if you care to share, right? Like we want to hear it.
Yeah. So this is takes place in like one of my DM's like homebrew world. And there's this entity that's like a cosmic being of some kind, who basically wants to steal the planet that we're on. But like one of the things that he's notorious for is like offering knowledge or like offering things to his followers, and this is how he like gets followers. But he's also like the villain. So like, but because he's the main villain of this campaign, our DM made this rule where any of our backup characters, for if our main characters like die or leave the party, has to have like a direct tie to the villain in order to like join the main party. And so for him, I was really into like this concept of like wizards and this like pursuit of knowledge to like the point of like taking it too far essentially. And so I wanted him to have this tie to this villain through having gone to him for knowledge, having gone too far, probably losing a lot of people because of it, to an extent losing himself, and then kind of after a point kind of realizing what had happened, but at that point it was too late, and so he was like held prisoner for a while, manages to escape, and is now seeking revenge. But is also still at a point where, I mean, they still want the knowledge. They're also at a point, or he's also at a point where he's not sure if like he was let go on purpose, if like this is like what he's doing is somehow serving the villain, if that makes sense. This is, I talked about this previously in like other episodes, but I really love like complicated relationships between like the good guys and the bad guys, I guess. And so I wanted this like interesting, complex relationship between this character and the villain, and this like uncertainty if he's like really working of his own free will, I guess.
That sounds really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do agree with like the complicated villain hero relationship. It makes it very interesting.
It's so fun. I love interesting dynamics like that.
So I guess I should speak. I DM mostly. I play very little. When I do play, it is almost always a human variant, and there's a specific reason for that. I follow a character and role-playing ideology that is, you don't need to have a crazy race, crazy main character class to play an interesting character. I'm not not degrading anyone that does. D&D is a very open game. You play the way you want. I love to restrict myself. I do. I'm a bit of a masochist in that way. I love to give myself a challenge in creating a character. And in playing a human with a variant feat, I also typically go fighter. And if you talk to a lot of other DMs who get to play, we honestly mostly play human variant fighters. Because from the Battlemaster subclass of fighter, with a specific feat of any of your choosing, you can create some of the widest mechanically variant characters in D&D. And I love mechanics. I love the systems behind it and altering and tweaking and finding the loopholes. So I will almost always play a human variant fighter. Or a human variant of some form. Only more recently have I actually started to create characters that are not. If we're talking about a favorite of my characters, and I'm going to stick with D&D, she would be my first. She was a human variant fighter. Her name is Amelia. Took the crossbow expert feat, dual-wielded hand crossbows, pumped her up with sharpshooter feat at a later level, and her damage output is insane, just because she's basically a crossbow machine gun. That was allowed in Adventurers League, and oh boy, the DM had trouble finding a way to beat my challenge rating. I've since ported her into a few different worlds, either as an NPC or in Lee was running a solo campaign for me, which takes place in a modified London, our world, with like hints of magic. She can talk about her setting at some other point in time, but we threw Amelia into that as kind of like a pseudo street urchin brawler. And I think she's my favorite iteration because I'm just basically playing a very cute, ignorant British girl running around like 1800s London. I also don't ask any plot questions because Amelia doesn't want to like interfere too much in people's business. So Lee is dropping plot points for me constantly and I never pursue them. It's partially now out of spite for trying to make her find ways to force me into the story she wants to tell, but it's also very on brand. So yeah, human variant 99% of the time. I will also play low charisma characters because I hate bards and I hate rogues. As a DM, God, I hate them. They do so many things. It's like, all right, how do I create a challenge for you, you incessant little gnat with so many weird stats and skill proficiencies? I just can't deal with you. Ha. I also don't play them very much. I specifically play characters with charisma as a dump stat. And the reason for that is I'm a very avid role player. I very much get into character and immersion, as I've said. And I find it's a bit of a cheeky way out. I can dump charisma, but my role-playing's good enough that my DM will often be like, oh, you were lying to me. I should have made you roll a deception. I'm like, yeah, you probably should have. But like, if I convinced you, then my character technically convinced the NPC, right? And they're like, roll, and I'm like, damn it. I try not to be an asshole player, but every once in a while it slips through. And recently, me and Marie-Soleil have been watching a lot of a YouTuber and TikToker named Offbeat Outlaw, who he and I have a lot of the same opinions on things. And he is a power gaming min-maxer. He picks a concept of a way to reach a certain goal, and he will research the mechanics and create the thing that gets there, while often creating an interesting story doing so. And I've recently gotten into that habit too, of trying to reach something interesting while creating character cohesion and power gaming at the same time. It's a very interesting way to take. A character on the back burner. I've got 1,000. So, like, will I ever play any of them? Chances are no. I'll go with my cute one. Eberron has a race available called the Warforged, which are sentient robots, basically, that were created for a war that's ended, and now they're trying to find their place in the world. I had a very cute idea for a Warforged. I forget what I ended up naming her, but I was thinking of going with the new Artificer class, because she's a robot. And I was basing her and her story kind of off of the labyrinth from Greek mythology, because I'm a big Greek mythology buff. And so her father, her creator, was Daedalus, who's the one who created the labyrinth, which means I believe her brother would be Icarus then, correctly?
Yes.
And the idea was that her father was the artificer that taught her everything she knew, created her, basically found her in a scrap pile, the whole Alita Battle Angel deal, and had a shop. And he ended up creating this immaculate prison, the Labyrinth. And one day he disappears, right? And she has to go and find him for the family. And so she takes all she knows. And the backstory or forward story or whatever would be ending up that she's actually supposed to be the Minotaur in his labyrinth. And he took her away from that. But she doesn't know it, obviously. And then the people who want the labyrinth fully operational kidnapped him to try and get her there. And the idea was that she is going to be just the most bubbly, effervescent character I could come up with. She was going to be loving life, super bright. I was going to see if I could get like almost a pseudo LED screen put onto her face so she could do like cute little emoji faces and stuff like that. And I would actually have them like set up on an LED app on my phone so I could like hold that up in game so that, I could fully get into that role play. And then the artificer, I believe I was going to go with the gun one with the eldritch cannons and make her think of those as like her other little brothers that she would bring out. Just a whole bunch of little cute familial things. Because honestly, my favorite archetype is like looking for a missing family member. And I don't know why. Not a goddamn clue. Especially like daughter or son looking for missing father. Love it. Have no idea why though.
That does sound like a cute character.
It's adorable, and I remember talking with you about this character before.
Yeah. Despite being dark, edgy, broody boy, I honestly don't play that many edgelords. It'd just be too on point. I try to subvert expectation.
Yeah, I mean, where's the fun in just playing yourself?
Never done a self-insert. Never have.
I mean, I think all my characters are self-inserts to an extent, but
interesting little whatchamacallit. Mental drill. Have you guys ever tried to just stat yourselves?
no.
No.
So there's an
My
app
stats
for
would be
it.
so bad.
Yeah, it's interesting to see because usually you always overestimate yourself, and I've always had friends like, no, this stat's low as hell for you, don't even. Which is kind of fun. There's an app for it actually somewhere which has like this big 100 questionnaire, I don't remember what the app's called, that will determine your stats, but obviously things are a little bit arbitrary here and there, but I digress.
Okay, but what do we all think our highest stats would be then? Just out of curiosity.
Highest and lowest. Highest and
lowest. My lowest is definitely strength. I think my highest would be intelligence.
I want to say my highest would probably also be intelligence. And my lowest would be strength or dex.
We should also talk about what classes we think we are, just saying. My highest, as I've been told many times, is my charisma. I can, despite being heavily introverted, walk into a group of complete strangers and just woo them. I don't know how. I usually think
I believe it.
Thanks, I guess.
I mean, he kind of did that to the group, to the InkGuild.
Yeah, he kind of did that here.
Hi,
so.
Hi, I'm here. I've wormed my way into everybody. Sorry. So my highest is probably charisma. From many things, like I took a leadership position in everything I've done. I'm a manager at work. I've won public speaking awards, all sorts of fun fucking things. My lowest, and this is surprising for me to admit, but I've been told it a few times, is my constitution. I have so many allergies. My skin is weak. I bleed very easily. I have a very high pain threshold, but for like what it takes to put me out of commission is not much. My bones break really easy. I got weak ankles. Like, I have no sense of smell pretty much. My constitution weak as shit. But what do you think everyone's classes are? You're both int, so like maybe wizards.
Yeah, I think I'd go wizard, just because I like to learn things about everything. Or maybe I don't know. I don't know enough about monk, but like people say they do a lot of researching, but I don't know.
I mean, I think it depends how you want to play it, but they're supposed to have good like their options, like their skill options tend to be the dex and the int based ones.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Alex,
I think
you got a class preference or a class idea?
I think I would have to be a wizard. I don't think I could like as me. I don't think I could do anything else.
Yeah, it'd be different if we were training for something from like a young age. We're in our 20s. We honestly, in a fantasy setting, we'd just be regular people. We would not be adventurers.
Yeah, I mean, I think I could do bard too, because I am a performer.
That's true. You do have a multitude of musical instruments, don't you?
I do. I'm also a trained dancer, and I did theater all through high school.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think bard or wizard would probably be my best bets.
So, I would like to say I'm a fighter. I would obviously love to say that. I am a bard. There are no doubts. I'm a musician. I'm a performer. Musical theater, drama, debate, improv. Again, leadership and managing positions and stuff like that. I wouldn't necessarily know what subclass. Probably eloquence bard, if I had to go with it.
I love eloquence bards.
Very interesting, right? Very interesting. Inspiring feat, yeah, I do that. I hype my friends up all the time. Yeah, you ever given someone a real life inspiration die? It's really weird. Yeah, it's fun. As much as I fucking hate bards, I am a bard, and I guess that's some of my own, ill will and self-depreciation coming out in D&D. Yeah, that's me. Hi. I also like to think my wisdom is high because I meditate a lot, but yeah, definitely a bard.
Is that what having high wisdom means? You meditate a lot?
Well, as Marie-Soleil can probably attest, my emotional intelligence and maturity and insight are pretty fucking good. But that just may be, my extra bard expertise coming into play. Because I also do narcotics, and that's not very wise.
Yeah, but
True.
you're a hedonist.
Also true. Yeah.
Which also fits with the bard.
But warlock, I could be a warlock, guys. I could have sold my soul to the corporations and been a corporate warlock.
Hey, warlock.
Warlock bard multi-class?
Fucking probably. Kind of useless. Kind of treading on its own toes a bit. We've hit every point on the list, Marie-Soleil is telling me.
Yeah, we've hit every point that we had on the list, and we've hit a couple things that we didn't have on the list. Is there anything else you would like to talk about, Alex?
I don't think so.
What about you, Tyler?
I mean, I'm sure we all have plenty of stories to share, but it's really up to, if we all have one really good one we want to talk about, but I think we're pretty much wrapped up.
So do we want to each share a D&D story and then wrap it up?
Sure.
All right, I guess I'll go first. I'm going to talk about my first ever session of D&D. I come into it, the party is already formed. I come in as a rogue, and we are fighting in a bedroom, I believe it was. And I don't remember the creature that we're fighting. I remember it was invisible, it growled, and did lightning damage, so we called it an angry thunder puppy. And the monk goes down, but then she's healed, and she stands up with 2 or 3 hit points. And then I rolled a natural 1 to shoot at an invisible beast invisible monster, not a beast, with an arrow. I missed and hit the monk, and she goes down again. This happened like 2 or 3 years ago, and they have not let me forget it.
That's
Every time, like almost every month that we play, it's brought up that pretty much every member of the party has killed our monk or knocked our monk out.
That's what happens when your character's up in combat all the time. You're gonna get hit when everyone else rolls nat ones.
Exactly. Or when people get mind controlled.
Yeah. That's funny.
What's one of your D&D stories, Alex?
I think the most exciting one I can think of was in a session we played somewhat recently. We had just introduced a new character who was a 10-year-old child, barbarian warlock multi-class.
Oh, that's a sick multi-class if you do it correctly. Don't know how it would work with a 10-year-old, though.
Angry little 10-year-old.
Yeah, she's a vampire demigod. It's complicated.
Ooh-wee, that's a character.
She's great. I love her. But anyway, so our characters are basically we're trying to get somewhere, and to do that we need to talk to pirates because we're trying to get to like an important pirate island basically, and the only way we can get there is talking to these pirates. But we can't let them know who we are because we're technically their enemies. So we're trying to like talk to this pirate, like a pirate captain. She comes out and she's like kind of like eyeing all of us up and basically goes, okay, to prove yourself to us, kill the weakest person in your party. Which was a great moment for like role play because it was really interesting to see like who everyone turned to automatically to like try and hit and who like was not having it. The 10-year-old child pulls out her maul, turns to one of the pirates who's like a member of the crew, goes to hit, rolls a natural 20, does upwards of 80 damage, and takes him out instantly in one hit. This is like the first time any of our characters have met this child. Just watched him like turn a dude into literal mist. And then we had to fight all the pirates because the captain did not find that amusing. But like in the moment, all of us were just like, that was sure something.
That's a way to introduce a character, all right. Goddamn.
That is very nice.
It was so funny.
Tyler?
All right. So I have picked a story because it was also on my DM's bucket list. Made a player cry. And that sounds real bad off the start, so I'm going to have to give quite a bit of context to get into this. So,
yeah,
me and my ex-girlfriend had like 3 solo campaigns going at a time because, like I said, she was addicted to D&D. It became a problem in their relationship. Not going to lie on that one. So, all 3 of the campaigns were taking place in the Witcher universe. From 3 different perspectives. 2 of the characters ended up interacting later, but I digress. Her character was a mercenary dude with a family, a wife and son, and his sister-in-law was living with them. The sister-in-law was an antagonistic home character, so whenever the character was at home, the sister-in-law was kind of like that sort of rival. Didn't think that this guy was good enough for her sister, and played on some tropes, but otherwise like very good family drama and character-driven purpose going on there. So one time he's back home. He needs the help of a witcher. Roll credits. Finds a witcher, and the witcher's willing to do this job to help him, but only if the main character there comes on a job with him and helps him. And this guy's a pretty beefed out mercenary dude, so he's like, yeah, I'll come help you slay this monster, blah blah blah. And because of a few things that have happened throughout the story in the Home Buddies, he's kept a lot of this secret from his wife. The fact that he's taken up mercenary work again and some of the things he's done, he's kept kind of on the wraps. And the wife is just loving and caring and doesn't just agrees, basically. But the sister-in-law thinks he's cheating on her or something. And because of a few low perception scores, main character does not see the sister-in-law following him out of town with this witcher to go do this job. Gets to the point where they're damn near close to fighting this. I made it an ice hag, burr hag from, I believe it was Volo's. Don't remember what I called it in universe, but that was the stat block. And they're getting ready to fight it when Melanie, the sister-in-law, rides up on a horse right behind and goes, "You fuck! You're cheating on my sister with work?" And they have like a really tense moment while the Witcher is like, we should not do this here. There's about to be, holy fuck, it's here. And roll for initiative. This girl is a level 1 bard. I'd made her basically for the sister-in-law. And they got surprised because they were not ready for this. Main character takes a few good hits. I try to run kind of low-level campaigns, I'll be honest. So it's only like level 5 or 6. And a Burhag is pretty challenging. And seeing that there was kind of a civilian in the combat, our main character hops in front of the sister-in-law, gets down. And I don't play by kill rules usually. I try to find alternate consequences for death. And there aren't really healing potions in the Witcher universe. There also really aren't healing spells. It's kind of dark fantasy. So he failed all death saving throws as the fight raged on around him. And we cut to black for a bit. And we come back with our main character waking up on the couch. Wounded as shit, got frostbite all over his body. And all he hears is crying. And he hears some shuffling, opens his eyes and looks around and sees like the Witcher is standing by the door. He sees his wife crying, but it's not over him. It's over the table, where he sees his sister-in-law staring blank-eyed up at the ceiling, frozen, completely solid. And my girlfriend burst into fucking tears, realizing that through, to some extent, her mistakes, not telling the spouse, not keeping everyone in the loop. And these were all in-character choices, and then just a few bad rolls and bad decisions later led to the death of who would be their home rival, but who was also part of their family. And I did like the whole funeral and everything that session, because it wasn't necessarily 100% planned, but it knew it was a possibility. And oh my god, the fucking waterworks. And I almost cried a little bit too, I'll be honest, because just how powerful and invested we both were into those scenes, into those characters. It was some of my best role-playing and some of my best scene work ever.
Jeez.
Sad D&D stuff. D&D can be really fun and really happy, really dark and really fucked up, or real goddamn emotional.
Yeah.
Alrighty then. That was heavy.
Hi, yes, it me.
Okay, so I guess this is a good spot to end the session. If
I think so.
everybody's on that. All right. So thank you for everybody listening in. We are at the InkGuild on TikTok, Instagram, and Twitter. Our main homepage is on YouTube and Spotify, but you can also get in touch with all of us individually through our own social media. We also have a Wix webpage if you want to learn more about us, and keep an eye out for more of our podcasts and other creative projects. Thank you all again for listening, and have a good night.